Okay, great. Well, we can get started then. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining the hashtag 4HL Families call. Christina wasn't able to make it today, so I'm gonna do a couple of foundation updates at the beginning, and then I'll hand it over to Tammy to lead the rest of the call. And I'll just have like 5 minutes probably, just a couple of quick updates. And if you have any questions about anything going on at the Yaya Foundation, just unmute and feel free to ask and just jump in. But the first thing that I'm really excited to share is, as you all know, we've launched our data collection program. It's been, I think, 3 weeks since we've launched, and we've had 30 families register to participate, which is amazing. Yeah, thank you guys for the thumbs up. It's amazing. That's 30, like everyone knows the size of our patient population, right? Like 30 is meaningful, and 9 countries also. Europe, Saudi Arabia, multiple countries in Europe, South America. So really exciting for us. And over time, and as we collect more data and as RareX and the platform kind of mature, just think that's going to be a really, really great tool for our disease community. And so for those of you who have already registered and already participated, thank you. And if you haven't yet, or if you're just hearing about it, I'm going to put the link to the data collection program webpage in the chat. And so consider participating. It is, we think, a great way to accelerate diagnosis of 4H, better understanding of the disease, and accelerate development of therapies that can help our kids. So please consider participating. But we're really excited about early returns. So thanks to those of you who already have. A couple of project updates that I want to share about stuff that we've talked about on previous calls. We have 2 interns at the Yaya Foundation this summer, Sabrina and Anusha, and some of you may have even already connected with them, but they are working on a number of projects, 2 of which I want to highlight. One is, on a number of calls, we've talked about like the need for resources for newly diagnosed families, and we're working on some really cool resources. We have like a 3-page, really graphically kind of positive and compelling document with info on the disease that we're going to share. And one of the interns is working on curating like a library of some key helpful videos from conferences and like journal articles with some summaries around what they are. Because I remember when we got diagnosed, our geneticist like gave us 2 journal articles, like, here, read these. We don't know how to read scientific journal articles. We try to like read what they gave us. We go look on Google, look on PubMed, and we're like have to become, MDs all of a sudden. And so, and we don't know what to, there's a lot of stuff out there and we don't know what's right and what's not and what's important. And so the intern is a genetic counseling student. She is just like going through the entire world of 4-H related publications and like choosing the key ones, putting summaries on them, and we're going to make that available on our website. The other is another project that we've talked about. It's a letter to clinicians that shares clinical information about 4-H that can help clinicians that see our kids provide better care and also save us the sort of headache of having to, educate our clinicians, and like not just one, but like the gastro and the pulmonologist and the PT and this would be a letter that we could give to our clinical team and would provide them with a lot of important information on 4-H. And so that will, that's in process, and we'll be rolling that out later this summer too. And if you get, well, as we get closer to rolling those out, I think the team will be interested in talking to you guys and getting your opinion on the resources. And so would love to reach out to you and see if you're willing to like look these over and share your thoughts about them when the team is ready for that. So we'll reach out later to ask if you'd be willing to do that, but just a heads up. Two more quick things, and then Tammy, I'll hand it over to you. One is, so just an exciting time. The database collection program, or the data collection program, is like our first big project that we've launched. And in the next, I hope, sort of probably 2 weeks, we're going to be announcing a project that we are funding that is being done by Dr. Bernard and a gene and cell therapy expert at the University of Massachusetts named Guangping Gao. And we are still like working on the contract, but we're I think close to being done, which is why I feel kind of comfortable sharing about this right now. But it will be a really exciting project, and I just wanted to give you a heads up. Please don't share anything about it yet, and definitely don't put anything on social media yet, because it's not a done deal yet. But we're getting close. And between the data collection program and this collaboration, which is sizable, it's like 6 figures in dollars and mid 6 figures in dollars. And between those two things, we're like reaching a really exciting point as an organization and as a disease community. And I'm excited about what lies ahead. Like we're like, our goal was really to get to, well, I mean, when we started, it was beyond our wildest dreams, I think, that we could take our disease community to this point. And then it became our goal to get to this point. And now we're here, and there are lots of researchers and clinicians and partnering organizations that are interested in working with us. And we just now need to take it to the next level so that we can scale up our data collection program and start to see results from it, and identify other projects like the one that we're going to be announcing in a couple of weeks that we can fund and launch, because that's what it's going to take to discover therapies that will help kids in our community. So very excited about that. And then the last thing, just as we get to this new place as a foundation and as a disease community, we're going to be doing a branding and website refresh. So we're going to sort of update our logo, and we have what I think is going to be a really cool new website that will look really professional. We'll share more information about our disease with our families and our stakeholders. And I think that's another thing that we'd like to reach out to you about, and just like get your thoughts on the logo, get your thoughts on the website. So a lot of you on this call have already shared your hashtag 4HL families stories, but if you haven't, consider doing that, because we are going to have, I think, a really, I would say, beautiful sort of way of sharing photos and stories on the new website. And so consider doing a write-up on your family, and we're happy to work with you on that. And we'll add it to the awesome stories that we already have on our website. So that is all I've got as far as updates on the foundation. I'll finish by just saying thank you. We have an amazing family community, and all of this progress, the data collection program, the funding collaboration, wouldn't be possible if we didn't have amazing kids and amazing parents like all of us in our community. And yeah, it's just very gratifying for me to work with all you guys and see the progress that we're making. So thank you. So I'll stop. If you have questions or want to talk about any of that or ask about anything else, please come off mute and ask away. And then afterwards, Tammy, I'll pass it off to you.
I do have one question. I don't know if I missed it when you were saying, what is it that we can expect to learn from that collaboration specifically?
Yeah, so what can we expect to learn specifically? The collaboration is the goal is to see if a gene therapy if a gene therapy treatment could work on an animal model of 4H. So it's the first step in a gene therapy pipeline for 4H. Okay. in a couple of other rare diseases, we've started to see gene therapy treatments get approved. And there's a long pathway for a gene therapy to get approved, starting from like a proof of concept, like just testing out an idea on some disease model, all the way to a clinical trial in people. And so this is the first step of a gene therapy treatment for 4-H. It's a proof of concept project. And the hope would be that we learn that a gene therapy treatment could be feasible in 4-H, and that we generate some data that supports that then allows the labs to get much larger funding from organizations with more money than our disease community has and the Yaya Foundation has, and could get an NIH grant or a CIHR, Canada's NIH grant, or get a company interested. But that's does that answer it, Kelly? Is that helpful?
Yeah. I didn't catch that when you first mentioned it, the detail, but that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, anything else?
Yeah, I have all kinds of questions.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, please.
The clinical documents, all the kids seem so different. How can we put things into one document, or is everybody just going to then personalize? I guess that's probably.
Yeah, so, that's a great question. There's no document that is going to tell the whole story for all of our kids, but it can, the hope is that it can tell the story of 4-H. And part of the story of 4-H is that there are a spectrum of phenotype of disease presentations, and there are severe cases and mild cases and quote unquote traditional cases. But we can talk about the spectrum of cases, and that's what we do. And the clinical, it's in the draft. The document is like in draft form right now, and that's actually a comment that I had, is that it's really important to share that. And that's not just for clinicians, it's for parents too. Like, I remember when we got diagnosed, and Yaya obviously had a really severe presentation, and we were reading the other stuff and wondering, hey, what this says it presents 18 to 24 months. Like, that's not Yaya, what's the deal? And we didn't understand that a disease could have a broad spectrum of phenotype. So,
right.
So we're communicating that, and then communicating just like, the different specialties that we would expect to see need to become involved, and honestly just highlighting the fact that there are a spectrum of cases, and sharing information about where the clinician can get more info. But yeah, it's not going to be everything that a doctor needs to know about a particular kid.
Right.
But our hope is that it'll get them a lot of the way there, and it'll familiarize them with the disease generally.
That will do a world of good, coming from someone who was undetermined or undiagnosed leukodystrophy for years, 6 or 7 years, I think, to try to tell doctors anything was just futile. So that's going to that is going to be really huge.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. All right, Tammy, with that, all yours.
All right, thanks, Ron, for the updates. That's very, very exciting, all the things that you guys are able to do. It's incredible.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing all that.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, and we have it wouldn't be possible without all of us. Like, we have an awesome, engaged family community, and that's really important.
We really do. Welcome, everyone. I see a couple of people that I don't know ever joined one of these meetings. We kind of try to present a couple of topics that I think are important, or maybe other people have asked. And I think it's really valuable for those of you that are newly diagnosed to hear the stories of other families, keeping in mind, like what Kelly said, no two paths are going to be the same. But I just distinctly remember that overwhelming feeling when I got Julia's diagnosis of like, how's this going to end? And it took a while, but I finally found a couple of moms that I could personally connect with because it sounded like their kids were on similar journeys. And I think that's important. We've got so much support within this group, and we are blessed to all be on the same page. I have a friend whose son is has a genetic rare disease, and there's infighting about, is it cerebral palsy or is it not? And it's just ridiculous. So Kelly and Courtney were both kind enough to offer to share their stories, and I'm happy to share Julia's story as well. If you guys have any questions, interrupt. Feel free to use the chat if that's easier. We all learn from each other, and I think that parents are the best source of information right now. Until our doctors know more, they're learning from us. So I think it's important that we rely on each other a lot for real information about what happened, how you handled it, what did you do, therapies, doctors, any of that, I think is really important. So don't feel like you have to make it a short story, because I think more information is better. Kelly, would you like to start? I kind of consider Kelly our veteran because it feels like she's, she knows a lot, because Matthew's a little older. He's in his early 20s. And like she was saying, the undiagnosed part is the worst part. So please share your story, Kelly.
Oh, it's so funny. I was thinking of that when Ron was talking about sharing the stories for the website. I haven't yet because there's so much, like, well, I don't even know how to pare it down, honestly. But as far as ULF goes, I mean, because Matt was pretty good as a kid. He played soccer until he was 9. He wasn't very good at it, but he played. He could play, he could run, he could do things. And he was brilliant. His pediatrician tested his IQ in the 140s, which was pretty astounding. And he was getting extra reading assignments at school, even though it was a special needs class. It was a special education class, because they thought he had ADD. That was the big diagnosis for the longest time. And I never bought into that. It just didn't sit with me. Yes, he was a little too active. Apparently, though, that is the leukodystrophy talking. Who knew? We found this out many, many years after that the lack of ability, the lack of imagination. I don't know if all the kids have this. He's very smart, but imagination, like if it's not black or white, it's very difficult for him to decipher what isn't specifically that. He didn't always get a joke, but his math skills were like off the charts, kind of. So it was difficult for him to understand that a car is going to drive down the road. You can't just run into the road like that. So people thought he was hyperactive or distracted, because there were things he just didn't understand that there were consequences to. Anyway, so he just had a little bit of tremor, was all it was. And the doctor said he would outgrow it. Neurologists told us he would outgrow it. They put him on Ritalin, which actually helped. Ritalin, because it is a stimulant and it stimulates those nerve endings to go where they need to go, it actually helped. Go figure. But he still wasn't ADD. But he was 13 when he first started to need a walker. When they noticed it in 2nd grade, actually, that walking down the stairs was difficult for him. But he was still okay. You could walk with your hand. He could walk holding onto the walls at school. He always had physical therapy, occupational therapy, but when he was 13, he got a walker. And I had noticed, before we knew anything about leukodystrophy, I had noticed all along, every time he ever got sick, and he would get some raging fevers just out of nowhere. Like, we were at the fair having a great time. We went on 4 rides and had some food. And all of a sudden, looked like he was going to pass out, turned white. We went to the first aid tent. They sent us to the emergency room. He had 105 fever. It's kind of out of nowhere. Like things like that would happen with him. And we had no idea that it was affecting him until after enough illnesses by 3rd or 4th grade. I'm like, you know what? These tremors are getting worse instead of better. His walking, not so great. He had a lisp. It would get more pronounced. So when he was 12 and we finally heard the word leukodystrophy and started going to Kennedy Krieger, that has always been something, and I consider it a symptom. And they eventually started to put that on the list of symptoms that they don't fully recover after illness or injury. And anyway, we used to take him every year to Kennedy Krieger. And then I think in 2009, we started with Dr. Vandiver at Children's National. 2008 was the first time we had ever heard of leukodystrophy. We went to the ULF conference. And Matthew was fine, kind of at that time. He had a little bit of the tremors. He could still kind of put his own shoes on, get himself dressed, go to school. And I'll never forget the first thing they opened the conference with. This woman was a speaker. And the first thing she said was, we all have to accept that our children are going to die. And my husband and I were like, no, that's not, that wasn't what we wanted to hear. So it kind of, I haven't been to another ULF conference, actually. I support them. I support what they do, but there's something about the groups. I like the 4-H meetings. The 4-H family meetings are fantastic because I feel like they're actually addressing us. Another thing, ULF is so encompassing about some of the larger types of leukodystrophy. So I like the ULF conferences that we've had. I've been to each of those. We haven't seen Dr. Vandiver in a few years, actually years. Matt is fully bedbound at this point. He's had quite a progression throughout his teenage years. He did graduate high school, but very quick progression from the time he turned 18, very quick progression, very quick. So he is fully bedbound, has very few skills, doesn't speak, doesn't eat, doesn't swallow, doesn't move. Very, very few things he can do. But he does have nursing at least a few days a week. Sometimes we've had 7 days a week. Sometimes we've had 2 days a week since about 2015 as well. So he is cared for. But I found that every time we went to doctors, he would pick up a germ or something and get sick and land in the hospital for 2 or 3 days. So we haven't even gone. We really need to get to CHOP. I mean, we really, really do. But there hasn't been anything, there haven't been any strides made, like they were working on things. So without anything new, I think he's better staying at home. And I don't know if that makes, it's not a give up, it's a keeping him, we don't take him too many places anyway, because if he does get sick, that could be awful, especially now, forget this, with COVID. But I don't know if I've gotten, there's just so much. I don't know if I've gotten off topic or not. And I apologize if I did. I don't know what information, I guess, would you be looking for more than that?
I think it's important to, again, understand that each journey is different. And then there is a difference between an A mutation and a B mutation.
Yes.
And Matthew is A. So that's, and Courtney's daughters are both A, which she'll be speaking in a second. And from what I've observed in our group, the A's seem to decline quicker than the B's. And again, everything's different, but I think, it's a good perspective to understand that Matthew was typically developing with a few little things going on that, your mom radar goes off, even though the doctors don't believe you. And then that's, he's what, 24? 20,
he's 25.
Yeah. So you know, Kelly's story is her story, and now I would like Courtney to tell her story because she's been blessed with two beautiful daughters who share the same genes.
Yes, they do. So our story is very different. And I think that it's good to hear because like we've discussed for so long, like not one child is, I mean, my two girls are different from one another and they are identical in their mutations. So Jamie was born normally, seemed to be a typically, you know, growing child. At 4 months old, I kind of started realizing there was something not right. We had a lot of just like tone issues, but I didn't know what tone issues was. I was first time mom. And so I just started asking doctors like, shouldn't she be doing this by now? And shouldn't she be doing this by now? And, you know, I had about 8 other friends that had children within 2 months, either before or after I had Jamie, that I was watching. And that's terrible to do as a mom anyways, let alone a mom of a special needs kid that we didn't know. So by 6 months when she wasn't sitting, I was really pressing doctors and they said, don't compare your children, blah, blah, blah. So I let it go. 8 months came around. Doctors finally started using the term floppy, which really hurt me because like it's something that I saw and I was like, that's not right. And I feel like it was a very like brushed off, like, oh, they're floppy. Like it wasn't a diagnosis. It wasn't a medical term. It was just like a normal everyday term. And it really bothered me. So I fought to get her into PT she started at 8 months old. And she caught up fairly quickly. She was sitting and crawling and pulling to stand, sitting by 11 months old, crawling by 13 months old, and then pulling to stand at 15 months. So we got a long way in a very short period of time with that. And then right after she turned 1, it was a week after she turned 1 year old. We noticed that she had a nystagmus. So her eyes just started like rapidly moving back and forth. So I instantly was like, this is neuro, like there's no other explanation for this. So I just threw myself into like trying to diagnose my daughter because nobody else was really helping me. And so she would get sick all the time. Like Kelly said with Matthew, fevers out of nowhere, respiratory illnesses. A month after she turned 1, we were visiting my parents in Florida. We ended up in the hospital for aspiration pneumonia on Christmas Day. We were there for 5 days. She also had rhinovirus that year, 6 times in the year. It was just something that she got every time we would like leave the house, basically. And so it was just hard to see her in and out of hospitals. When she was 18 months old, we got sick again, ended up in the hospital for 12 days. By the time we left the hospital, we were G-tube. And I was, sorry, backtrack a little bit. So Jamie turned 1. We found out her nystagmus started. I told my husband we should stop trying to have another child because we knew something was bigger than just some disability, like what is it called? Physical disabilities was happening. And then we found out a week later we were pregnant with our second. So we had no choice really in the matter of finding our diagnosis before having 2 children. So when Jamie was in the hospital for her G-tube, I was up at 3 a.m. one morning, head in my laptop, just Googling, trying to figure something out. And I came across this article about a little boy who had literally every single diagnosis that Jamie had going on. And I was doing more and more research about it. And he had PMD, which in the leukodystrophy community is a male only affected leukodystrophy, but it's very, very similar to 4-H. So I was like, it can't be male only. It can't be male only. And then that's when I found leukodystrophy as a whole. And so when we were in the hospital, when she was 18 months old, I asked the neurologist, I said, can we look at her MRI again? Because she had one done at 14 months. I said, I think we're dealing with a white matter disorder. And she brushed me off. And she said, myelination doesn't form until they're 2. We can't diagnose you regardless. She's only 18 months. And I just was really, really discouraged. We did a follow-up appointment with her after the hospital, and she was getting worse, and we didn't know what to do. And so finally, she agreed to send us to genetics. So we had Jamie's formal diagnosis in January of 2019. So we are still very, very new to this in the grand scheme of things. But we've come such a long way with the community, I feel like. Layla was 4 months old when we got Jamie's diagnosis. And she was developing typically. She was much stronger than Jamie ever was from birth. And so we decided against testing her. You have 1 in 4 shot of having an affected kid. What are the chances? Well, by the time we got to CHOP, because we took Jamie to CHOP, she was diagnosed in January. We were there in April. We saw Dr. Vanderveer, and she said, I started seeing tremors in Layla. And so I had her do a physical examination, and she said, we'll run genetics here, but she's 4-H. And I said, okay. So we got her diagnosis a month later because we knew what we were testing for that time. It didn't take as long as Jamie's. And then every day since then, we got Layla's diagnosis in May. June was the 4-H or the ULF conference into 2019. I called my dad. I said, I'm going. I don't know how, but I'm going. My husband said, I can't go. I said, I respect that. He stayed home and watched the girls, and my dad flew to Chicago with me, and we attended our first conference. And very similar to what Kelly said about opening up and hearing, you have to kind of come to terms that you kids are going to die. I got a little bit of that feeling, but it wasn't as like in our face that like how Kelly explained it to me or to us just now. But I remember the 4-H conference or the 4-H breakout of that was the moment where I felt safe and I felt heard, and I felt like I walked away with some sort of positivity. I was able to speak with Dr. Bernard like one-on-one about my children and our diagnosis, and she kind of looked over the information I had with me, and from what we know the disorder, we know that my girls have a variation of the severe type of 4-H, but we don't know anything else than that. And at the time, Jamie was thriving. And so Dr. Bernard was like fascinated. She was like, oh my gosh, I was showing her videos, and she's like, she's doing more than I would have ever thought a child with these mutations on paper would ever be able to do. And that just felt fantastic to hear. And then the end of that year came around, and it was October-ish, and she was starting to decline. We noticed that her crawling wasn't much anymore. She turned 3, and so from October of 2019 to March of 2020, she lost all of her physical abilities. We were no longer holding our head, sitting on our own, crawling, scooting, rolling over, anything. So she became chair-bound in a very, very, very fast period of time. And then that was in March of 2020. By November of 2020, she was trached. Secretions were too hard to manage. Respiratory distress was setting in more and more. And it was a decision that I needed to make for her quality of life. We were suctioning with a suction catheter down her nose and throat to get to her upper airway and like her chest and lungs, and trying to hold her down. Doing that was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And doctors initially gave me pushback when I asked for a trach, and they said, oh, quality of life, and oh, ventilator. And even Dr. Bernard, she said, count your time as a blessing and take it. Don't put her on, like, don't do this. And I said, no, I'm sorry. I'm not there yet. And so we were trached. She requires no oxygen. She requires no ventilator. We can suction within 2 seconds while she's watching a TV show, and we're not even invasively harming her at all. And it's been the best decision that we've ever made. And every doctor that has ever given me pushback on it has apologized to my face and told me that they were sorry for any pushback and not doing it sooner. So really have to advocate for our kids. And like everybody has said, and every kid is different. The doctors don't know what we're dealing with. They're not with our kids every single day. They don't know their intricacies, because Jamie's so peculiar. She's so different, and she's so different from Layla. And right now Layla's thriving, and she's almost 3, and she's still doing all the things Jamie used to be able to do. And it's really hard for us as parents. Like, we're going through a little bit of PTSD right now because she's almost 3, and that's when Jamie lost it. And we're starting to see Layla kind of fall out of sitting every now and again. Her balance really goes. So we don't know what's to come in the next 5-6 months. We could see the same course of progression. But we know that Layla's always been stronger, and we're holding on to that. But every day is just another day to push forward, and we have to keep telling ourselves that. And our girls, we've always said that they do something every day to make us smile or laugh or just bring joy to our lives. And we really just focus on those moments, because I could lay in bed all day and cry and sleep and not do anything, but it doesn't make my girls better. It doesn't make me better. And I'd rather be up with them and see them smile and be happy. So that's kind of our journey and story.
Thank you so much, Courtney. I know you've got a whirlwind going on every moment in your house. Does anybody have any questions for either Courtney or Kelly? Again, both of their children or all 3, sorry, have the A mutation. So I'll give you the B mutation story. Julia was fine when she was born, big, happy, chubby baby. She finally crawled. She kind of had a weird crawl where she would just cross her back legs and kind of drag them with her. She would pull up to furniture, and what I noticed, and I'll never forget this day, my sister was over visiting from Ohio. Julia was 18 months old. It was Christmas time, and my sister went and bought her like a little cart that a kid would push around the house. And Julia put her hands on it, and that's it. She didn't know what to do with it. And we were trying to kind of show her, but she really wasn't walking on her own. And I distinctly remember going to the pediatrician and saying, I think there's something going on here developmentally. I, again, had a friend whose daughter was probably 2 months younger. And ironically, her daughter was diagnosed with like early abilities or whatever you want to call it. Like, this kid was like running when she was like 8 months old. So it was a horrible example of what I should be expecting. So my doctor basically blew me off and said, you know what, just stop worrying and being that mom. And she sent me to get a physical therapy workup. So we go, and Julia's kind of toddling. Her legs are really stiff, and she kept her arms out like, for balance. This physical therapist, now that I know, was extremely apathetic. She just sat there with kind of a clipboard and wrote some stuff down. She says, there's nothing going on. She just needs some core strengthening. Like, okay. get home, throw in the stroller, off to the park we go. Well, kids are climbing the ladders and they're in the swing and they're running and playing tag. And Julia couldn't do any of that. Going to the park was really hard for a really long time. So fast forward, she gets into preschool. Now it's clearly abundant that something's going on with her physically because she's still not running, jumping, hopping, skipping. She's holding onto the wall. So I'll never forget this. Julia also had what they thought was ADHD. She would play on her own. She wouldn't engage with other kids. She wouldn't, like when they called her name, she wouldn't respond. And again, she's 3 years old, 3.5. So, but every time the teacher held up somebody's name, she could read it. So I'm like, she's in there, just leave her alone. To the point where I had a preschool teacher come over and visit us in the house during the day and had lunch and said, see, this is my kid, okay? So I had to prove her to everybody. So it was a brand new school, it was a Catholic school. The social worker brings me in. Out of the blue, she says, have you ever seen a neurologist for Julia? And I remember what the F are you talking about? You think there's something wrong with her brain? Are you kidding me? I was so incensed. But you know what? My family had started poking at me too, saying something's not right, something's not right. So went to the neurologist at Children's in Chicago. And he watched her walk and he explained to me what the cerebellum does and that it performs all these things to help with fine motor, gross motor skills, things like that. So he does the MRI and he comes back and he says, it's cerebral palsy. She'll never get any worse. She might get better and don't worry about it. And I was like, fine. I look up cerebral palsy. I'm like, I don't know what this means. And at the same time, we started seeing a doctor at University of Chicago because Julia had the ataxic gait, the drunken sailor thing. And so she was born in 2001. So this was 2005-ish. He had heard about Dr. Vanderknapp and Dr. Wolf's research going on for 4-H. But it was so new that we would have had to have the whole genome thing for $30,000. I mean, it was there's no way. Plus, she was not old enough to even know anything about her, pubic development, any of that. So then I started to notice that she never had the top 2 teeth erupt at all. And the ones that did come in came in reverse order. Instead of starting in the middle and going back, they started at the back and came in, except for those 2. So Dennis took an x-ray. Yes, the adult teeth are there. She hadn't lost any teeth at all, and she should have. She was 8 years old by then. They did oral surgery. They opened that up. The top 2 teeth came in. However, they were 180 degrees reversed. So the back of her teeth, you could see when she opened her mouth. They did a little cosmetic thing. And so now I'm like, hypodontia. Okay, there's one check. So she had also had another follow-up MRI and an ABR, automated brainstem response, because I was certain she was deaf in one ear, because every time I handed her the phone to talk, she only put it to one ear. She's sitting watching TV and I call her name, she can't find me. She couldn't tolerate the headsets. So ABR said, okay, yes, she's deaf in one ear, it's neurological. When the second MRI came back, there was a mentioning of white matter kind of degeneration thing. And I talked to to Dr. Gomez, the ataxia specialist, and he kind of said similar, let's wait and see. Then the third one came and it talked about profound volume loss and possible myelination. But still at the time, it would have been a whole genome thing. So fast forward, and she was 12 years old. Dr. Gomez had sent her MRI and blood work over to the Netherlands, and I had completely forgotten about it. It had been like probably a year and a half. One day I'm at work and I get this email. She's got 4H syndrome on the B mutation, and of course, like every other mom in this call, you sit and start going on the computer. The first thing I saw was life expectancy to 30. So of course I'm hysterical. I go outside and it was just horrible. Fast forward to now, she's 20 years old. She graduated high school. She's in a program through Chicago Public Schools that they teach kind of independent living skills. She tests about the 3rd to 4th grade level on math and reading. She's bright. She gets jokes. She's got a low average IQ. She's fairly independent. She sometimes needs help with zippers and buttons, but she's actually a pretty strong chick. So she's very determined to get things done. We're going to have another MRI done later this summer. And I'm really curious to see what it shows. We're leaving Tuesday for CHOP. Julia was diagnosed with osteoporosis because of lack of estrogen. And I'm not putting her through puberty because just they don't have enough information to know the neurological effects. And she is such a happy, sweet kid that I don't want to turn her into that would just be horrible to put her through that. She wouldn't understand it. And also, it's very possible that, if she would continue to grow into a woman, that the myelin would not be sufficient enough to keep all her skills together. So we could see a serious decline. So we're going to figure out what to do about that when we get out there. But I have noticed with Julia getting sick, it'll take her up to 3 weeks sometimes before she's ready to go back to school. And that's happened quite a few times. It seems to be allergy related. She cut her finger pretty deep. It did not require stitches, but to this day, and this was almost a year ago, it still has not healed properly. So, those are kind of some of the things I'm seeing. I get scared every once in a while because she'll ask me a question, Mommy, what's for dinner? We're having chicken. Okay. Half hour later, Mommy, what's for dinner? Now, is that her not paying attention to me answering her, or is that her not remembering? And I'm a little worried about that too. So we'll see what happens at our visit to CHOP and just take it from there. But as Courtney was saying, and Kelly as well, I cherish every moment with her. And it's great because I don't have to work. Steve, my husband, loves her like his own daughter. And so we get to do a lot of great family time together, mom and daughter time together. And it's wonderful. And she's taught me to stop and live in the moment, which is great. I don't know what she's going to be like. I don't know if she's going to rapidly decline physically. Is it going to be more mentally? I don't know. There's a man who's in his mid 30s with it, and he was just as able as Julia was now at 20, and he's wheelchair bound, and it's almost like a dementia type quality. So we prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on the development and how our children have kind of taken their course. Feel free to ask. And I don't know if we have enough time because we're almost on the hour. I wanted to talk also about self-care because it's so important. At the ULF virtual conference this year, I was able to catch an organization called Angel Aid Cares. Their whole goal is to support moms whose kids have rare diseases. The lady that started it is one of 5 children, and 3 of her brothers had Hunter syndrome. And this is back in the 70s. They didn't know what to do with them. And unfortunately, all 3 passed when they were really young. But she saw the impact it had on her mother, their marriage, etc. And I really think it's important to step back and remember that you're still a person, even though you've got a child with a disease that nobody knows anything about yet. But step back and take care of yourself. And I wanted to try to get into that, but maybe we can do it next time. I did want to point something out that really caught my eye, and this is why I kind of did a nosedive into this organization. Courtney had mentioned PTSD because of Layla turning 3, and that's kind of when Jamie hit her bad times. They say it's not in the past. This is chronic trauma syndrome, if you will, that your children are present and they're in your life and they need to be taken care of. So it's not something that happened in the past. This is something that you're chronically living with every day. And we all know what stress can do to our bodies anyway, but I think I don't know if you're aware or not of what the impact of all this has had on you as a person. And I think it's really important that we try to practice self-care, whether it's doing yoga or working out or reading or knitting, whatever it is, just to take some time for yourself and try not to think about your child for that block of time. You know, we all know the adage, put your oxygen mask on first. You know, your kids are only going to be as good as you can give them. So I could preach to the choir, but we can maybe get into that next time. I wanted to say that September 19th is our next family visit, family call, topics to be determined. And then November 21st, we have Dr. Bernard joining us. So, you know, that's a few months away, but that's something we can all start thinking about questions. Is there any, or does anybody have any questions? Want to make any comments? Want to share anything that, you know, they feel comfortable doing? I'm really glad to see that some of the newly diagnosed moms are on the call, because I think it's important to hear what's going on from moms, but just as everybody's already said, this is a really good supportive group. So, you know, feel free to put something in the chat. Always contact any of us at any time through Messenger on Facebook. There's other families that are just as willing to talk too. So there's no question that we would ever judge, because we all have questions every day. So just know that we're here for you guys and we're all in this together. So never feel alone and never feel like nobody understands, because we all get it.
That is true.
Anyway,
Can Matt say hello?
we would love to see Matt.
Hey, Scoop. You want to say hi?
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, buddy.
Hi, Matt.
Did you get new glasses? I like those. Those look great.
He's wide awake. He had a little bit of congestion, so I had to run in here. You know how it is. Yeah.
It happens. All right. Well, thanks, guys, for coming. I always look forward to these, because I just wish we could all get in the same room together and talk for the whole weekend. Maybe someday. I know. Yeah, I was trying to work on maybe a family conference somewhere for just our families. Anyway, thanks again, and we'll be posting updates, of course, from Yaya, and feel free to ask any questions anytime of any of us.
Yeah, Tammy, quickly, we are going to have a conference next year. We don't have a date yet, which is why we haven't, but it's likely April or May. So so we're hurrying to find a date, and it'll be in Montreal, and we'll share information about that as soon as we can. We're like trying to line up a date with, you know, a bunch of busy researchers and stuff like that. But we're planning to have a couple days of conferences and then clinic visits with Dr. Bernard on either side. So more information to come as soon as we are able. But before we drop out, does anyone, particularly, you know, people who didn't have a chance to present or anything, is there any comments or questions that anyone else wants to share before we go?
I have a quick question for Tammy, actually. You had mentioned that you didn't want to put Julia through puberty. I don't know if
Right.
that was just recently or at the time as well too, but is there information that you have on that or the reasoning behind it? I'm just curious. I mean, Evan's, he's only 8.5, so he's not quite there yet, but I know when we met with his doctor or his endocrinologist, he had said that if he wasn't hitting it and he wasn't at the milestone where he thought he should be, that they were able to kind of kickstart it for him at that time. So I guess that's kind of the road that we would plan on heading down. But I mean, if there's information out there that suggests that might not be the best option for him, I mean, I'd be just curious to read up on it.
Yeah, so there's a brand new paper that was written, and I can put it on our Facebook page. It was just published in January on the endocrine system and 4-H. So
Okay.
there's that. 2 years ago, when we saw Dr. Vanderver, we discussed this specifically because Julia has gone through some puberty, but not enough to kick her into having a menstrual cycle. There's two schools of thought. One is genetic hormone therapy should be considered if it's especially affecting them emotionally and mentally and how they feel about themselves. That's really the one thing that, you know, families have to really think about and measure. The other side of it is that there's not enough data to show what would happen neurologically to their function once they would start hormone treatments. The paper will state that it's not necessarily a treatment that will actually be effective or last. Certainly with girls, estrogen is really important for bone health. You know, boys, I'm sure progesterone is similar. So they leave it up to the family to make the decision. I'm going to meet with an endocrinologist when I'm out there because she was diagnosed with osteoporosis and she's only 20, which blew my mind. You know, I personally weigh it in a few ways. Would I rather have her developing and going through puberties for the rest of her life, or menstrual cycles the rest of her life, and to constantly have to be on hormones? Because once you start, from my understanding, you have to stay on them. Do I want that? Or do I want broken bones, which is the other side of it? And given her personality and the way she is, and the way she feels about herself, she's got a lot of confidence. There's just, for us personally, there's no way I would ever put her on hormones. It just, I also think psychologically, neurology, as far as like just knowing and learning things, I think it would be disastrous for her to understand what's going on with her body every month. So that's our personal reason. And, you know, I don't hold any judgment one way or the other. It's whatever people decide. There's families I know that have used the therapies and they've been successful. The other consideration is that when you're going to put them on the hormone therapies, they're going to grow. You know, Julia's body is looks like an 8-year-old. She's tall anyway. But, you know, to develop and to grow into a woman or into a man is going to put stress on the myelin anyway. And now, is there enough myelin to support that growth? Because you would run the risk of maybe starting to lose some abilities. There's no right answer. It really is personal. And I think every child has to be just looked at by the parents. You know your kid better than anybody else and make that decision.
Yes. Also, if I can just add to that, he's only 8. That is absolutely a consideration. We considered this with Matthew. We did not do any sort of forced puberty with Matthew. Obviously, he still looks like he's 12, and he's 25. That was 10 or 12 years ago that this even crossed our minds, that we even went to the endocrinologist to discuss this. And we decided against it at the time because there wasn't anything really in the works that we saw that could possibly turn 4-H around. If your little guy's 8 years old you don't know what the next 4 years can or can't bring to 4-H. I would remain hopeful. And just do your research, kind of really look into it for him, but see where 4-H is as well.
Right.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah, if you can send that link to me or put it in the Facebook group, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. No problem.
Elise, there's also an endocrinologist in the US at Harvard Medical School called Stephanie Seminara, and she works on, the endocrine features of neurological disorders. And she might be someone worth reaching out to, like, if you're interested in learning more, researching more, talking to her, and we could help try to introduce. We had connected with her over last summer to talk about participating in our 4-H Leukodystrophy collaboration network, and could reach back out to her and make an intro if you ever wanted.
What did you say her last name was? Stephanie?
Seminara. I'll throw it in the chat. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
Has been awesome. Like, he was probably one of the first doctors I ever met that I was finally like, oh, good, somebody's looking after us, and he kind of went above and beyond at the time to help us. And yeah, I was just comfortable with him, but I don't know his connection with neuro too, right? I know he communicates with our neurologist, but again, our neurologist doesn't know anything about 4-H or Pol 3. So
Anybody else have anything they'd like to add or ask or discuss? Thanks again for joining, everybody. It's so good to see faces and to talk to each other and hear voices. So like I said, we're always here. We're one big happy family. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Tammy, for leading, and thanks everyone. Best family community for sure. So really nice to see you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye.